Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, joined by my co-host, Mike Gruen. Mike, quick question of the day for you. You play board games?
I do.
Okay. So we had a little debate here at Hatch around board games. You know, in your opinion, what is the greatest of all time board game? What's the GOAT board game?
The greatest of all time. I mean, I do like Settlers of Catan. I like the German style, like Max Min type problems where it's the tactical and the strategic. So Settlers definitely comes top to the list. Trying to think if there's anything else, but it's pretty tough to beat.
Yeah, Catan was actually one of the top ones, and then we had Risk. Risk is my favorite, my personal favorite. But Clue.
It's because it's an easier game that's based mostly on luck.
Okay, you're clearly not making the right packs. But Clue was actually the number one, which I was very surprised. I didn't know I thought Monopoly was going to be up there, but either way, talking a little board game talk.
Interesting.
Well, let's jump in. Give the listeners a little bit of a preview of today's episode. So today we're going to be talking about the intersection of venture capital and dual use tech startups. For clarity, for our listeners, a dual use venture is a technology startup that has both government and commercial customers. We've got two excellent guests with us to break this down. We have Mike Brown, a partner at a venture capital firm in the Bay Area called Shield Capital, and Topher Haddad, the co-founder and CEO of, is it Albedo?
Albedo. Yeah.
Albedo. Got it right. Cool. All right. Albedo, they are a satellite imagery startup headquartered, I believe, in Denver, Colorado. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And to set the stage for this episode, Shield Capital was one of the lead investors for Albedo's Series A round. So it is not by accident that we have brought these two folks together. It was a strategic pairing of these guests. So I'm confident this will add to a really fascinating discussion today. Guys, thank you both for joining us on the Pair Program.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Cool. All right. So before we dive in to the discussion, we do kick things off with a fun segment called Pair Me Up. Here's where we're going to go around the room, kind of shout out a complimentary pairing. Mike Gruen, you always start us off. What do you got for us?
So today's is long meetings and many scheduled short breaks. The key part of that is not the long meeting, but the scheduled short breaks. We had an all-day planning session today, so it was sort of top of mind. It was several hours long, but I definitely appreciated the chief product officer scheduling many short breaks that broke up the thing nicely, gave everybody an opportunity to sort of catch up on all the stuff that they were missing. And I think it sort of made the whole day go a little bit faster because everybody was paying attention because they didn't feel that need to like, oh, I have to go check Slack or I have to check email right now. Like they knew that like in 20 minutes, they're going to have an opportunity to do that and stuff like that. So that's my pairing. I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, you love your meetings.
I hate my meetings, but meeting is the opposite of doing. But yeah.
Yeah. Mike's in engineering leadership, so he's got one-on-ones out the kazoo. So sure it's a relatable thing for many other of our listeners as well.
I mean, to be clear, I do like the one-on-ones. I enjoy that part of the job. It's the big session meetings. As I said, meeting is the opposite of doing.
For sure. So I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I'll jump in. So without getting too deep here, my pairing is turning 40 and reflecting. So I recently celebrated my 40th birthday. It was a fun gathering. Had friends and family from years and years ago. I gave a toast at the party, and prep for the toast was just doing a bit of reflecting on my life. A lot of folks say like the 40th is that midpoint of life. It's a good opportunity to reflect on where you are, where you thought you would be. And for me, just a good time to just reassess some life priorities and goals and overall purpose. So, got a little bit deep, but for me recently becoming a first-time parent, the purpose was quite clearer for me. I'll leave it at that. So it was a healthy exercise, but that's my pairing. So turning 40 and reflecting. So I'll pass it along to our guest, Topher. Why don't you give us a quick intro and tell us your pairing?
Yeah, awesome. Excited to be here. So Topher Haddad, co-founder and CEO at Albedo. We are building satellites that fly very low and take very high resolution pictures of the Earth. So we'll get into that more. But after thinking long and hard about my pairing, I think one of the best ones is Topo Chico with my 9 to 5 or whatever the actual hours are. But I sit and work all day drinking Topo Chico, which is turns out to be a pretty expensive work habit, but it helps me focus. So
nice. That's solid. Are you a ranch water fan by chance?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, into ranch water. LaCroix, I mix in LaCroix too, but I'd say key lime LaCroix and regular Topo Chico, maybe occasional lime, are my go-tos all day.
That's solid. My neighbor just opened up a Mexican street taco restaurant, and one of the key like drinks that they've got, like the Coke and like the old school glass bottle, but then they also have Topo Chico, and it's always
nice.
Always a good option. You just don't see it very often. Not around here, anyways. Not East Coast.
Yeah, I think it's spreading. I remember when I was living in the Bay Area and it first started, Whole Foods started selling it there. Was a big deal, but in Texas, it's everywhere. I mean, it is the water or the wine honey of Texas. So
sweet. Nice. All right, we'll have to evaluate if it's going to be the top of our pairing charts. We'll have to get back to you on that.
All right.
But I do dig it. I like that. Awesome, Mike. How about yourself? A quick intro and your pairing.
Okay, Michael Brown, partner of Shield Capital, just leaving an assignment as the director of the Defense Innovation Unit at the Department of Defense, whose mission was really to bring commercial technology into the military. And now being at Shield, I'm really doing a similar thing, but now from the private sector side. How do we work with, phenomenal entrepreneurs like Topher and help them get their companies to be successful and selling into government and commercial applications? Well, Tim, for a pairing, I think I'm inspired by what you talked about in terms of reflection. So the other end of the spectrum in terms of age of this group, and as a new grandparent, my favorite pairing is being with grandkids and lack of discipline. So the beautiful thing about moving on from being a parent is once you get to the grandkids, no discipline involved. It's just having fun with them and handing them back to the parent.
Injecting them with lots of sugar and then handing them back to the parent.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. How many grandkids do you have?
2.
Oh, very nice.
Boy and a girl.
Good stuff. I like that. Well, let's go ahead and transition into the heart of our discussion. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about dual use tech today. This plays off some recent episodes that we've been running, centered around commercial innovation in the defense and national security sector. Michael, your experience at the Defense Innovation Unit, I mean, super relevant, super spot on. So I'm really pumped that we got you. And I'd love to, just expand on this concept of dual use technology, defining it in more detail, understanding some of the different use cases where we're seeing this popping up across both commercial and government sectors. We'll hear more on how VCs maybe evaluate and assess dual use companies, and expand a little bit on like what those regulations or what those challenges might come into play when positioning that tech into these regulated industries like the Department of Defense. But first off, I'd love to begin with Mike. Give us a little context on maybe the investment thesis at Shield, and also I'd share with our listeners how the partnership between Shield and Albedo began.
Okay, yeah. Shield is really a first-time venture fund focused on early-stage companies, which means seed stage, Series A. So Albedo fits right in the center of it. And we're working on 4 different sectors: AI, cyber, autonomy, and space. And if you think about those sectors, they're all ones that the military needs, but is not leading the development on. So the big change in defense tech, if you go back 50 years, would be the department was inventing a lot of the technology it needed. So it was working with NASA to send rockets that basically it designed with some defense primes up into space. It was developing chips, all things that today the department needs, but is not on the front end of developing. What the department's on the front end of developing today would be hypersonics and what's called directed energy or concentrated lasers. So a lot of the technology that's needed is developed in the commercial world by companies like Albedo and others. So the challenge is, how does the department get access to that? So the good news is now we can leverage private investment, venture capital, to develop these companies rather than having them be purely taxpayer funded. If you go back to the 60s, a big part of the federal budget was developing the rockets and the space program. Now that can be done with outside capital, so big benefit. And we get competition. We get more companies that are participating here, which gives the taxpayers a bit of a break through that competition. And you get leading edge capability. You're not dependent on kind of one source to get that. So our thesis is that we'll be able to both invest in those companies and make money for our investors, because not only do they serve the government, but they also have commercial applications. So that's the thesis. It's a pretty new one. It's defense tech is a rapidly growing area, part of the venture market, but we haven't had enough time go by to see, okay, how do these investments play out? We've had some pretty good examples of big wins. Companies like Anduril, companies like Shield AI are doing well, but we haven't seen this through a whole sort of crop of investments. And I'll let Topher talk about how the partnership with Shield got connected with Albedo.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, it was funny. The relationship started with Shield as I was a customer reference for a different company that Shield was evaluating. And it turned in, and I was actually fundraising at the time, so it turned into an investment. But yeah, that was a little over a year ago when we closed our Series A, and very much I think Albedo reflects kind of the core dual use definition of really serving both commercial and defense and intelligence. And so historically, and like the heritage of a lot of our technology come from the government owned and operated satellites that have been around for a long time and done a ton for our national security. And so what we're really bringing from a commercial perspective is this capability in this product that today you kind of need drones or planes for to capture this level of resolution and give our customers the certainty that comes with that. But now we can do it at a global scale with all the benefits you get from a satellite. And so that's really important for industries like insurance, utilities, mapping, agriculture, those different sectors, on top of adding to the existing capability of the US government in terms of high resolution remote sensing in both the visible and the infrared. And so that really, that plus kind of the core technology we're building in this new part of space called VLEO is what I think really attracted Shield to Albedo and us working with them. And the attraction was those connections, the network, the know-how of working with the defense department and the intelligence community in terms of how to do business development, where to spend time, and how to think about that strategically and long term. So yeah, we've been working with Shield for about a year, and it's been phenomenal. It's a huge tailwind to have a team that knows the defense world like Shield does.
When you were looking for investment, were you looking specifically for firms that had some expertise in dual use tech?
Yes, I would say, and Breakthrough Energy Ventures co-led that round with Shield. They were more of a climate tech oriented fund. And that was really like very well aligned with our go-to-market and our goals for the market opportunity was defense and then commercial with a lot of climate and applications. And so we didn't have as many investors very actively involved before the Series A. And so when I was talking to different firms, knowing that there were certain firms out there with specific theses and focuses like Shield and on the defense side was definitely something that was very attractive and something that we wanted, from a prioritization perspective, was not just the capital, but a fund that could really bring value in other ways beyond that. So yeah, definitely was of interest. Interesting. And so some context on your background, Topher. So, where were you before you started Albedo? Talk to us a little bit about your background, where you came from. Certainly. So I worked for Lockheed Martin in the Bay Area for about 5 years before starting Albedo. I worked on classified remote sensing satellites for the US government, and I did a mix of system architecture work with more of a specialty in optics and imaging science. And so both And I thought space was cool as a kid, but wasn't necessarily the person that grew up set on working in space. But I feel super lucky that was the first job I got, because I just fell in love with the entire space industry and satellite imaging specifically, both the engineering side and then also the applications, getting to see what it's done for our country. So that's what I did for about 5 years. Learned a ton, worked with amazing people, worked on amazing missions, and got exposed to kind of this defense tech and the application side of things.
Neat. I am curious on so that obviously played a part in having some connections to folks in the defense space. When you first started Albedo, did you know it was going to be a dual use tech kind of technology company, or was that something that evolved as you were going through some different use cases? And what kind of came first? The more of like a commercial use case or defense?
Yeah. So I didn't really know. So the idea for Albedo, which we won't get into this story because it's kind of long, but it actually came from when Trump tweeted a classified satellite image. And I didn't know much about the commercial market for imagery, but this tweet sparked this conversation in the commercial industry around how game-changing it would be to get this resolution in the hands of those different commercial markets I had mentioned. And so I guess like the early days of this, we kind of viewed Albedo as, there's obviously a big opportunity with the Department of Defense, with the intelligence community. We know there's a lot of supply limitations today around how much high-res imagery they can collect. And so that's kind of the bare minimum opportunity of, this big market opportunity with the defense and intelligence community. But the commercial was kind of that was where this kind of venture scale potential outcome came in, of we could unlock all these applications or expand all these applications in these commercial markets by bringing high resolution, making it easier to buy, and kind of these different kind of key ingredients that we think are needed to catalyze the commercial market. So I think, from the beginning, we always knew both were the focus, but commercial is where it's more, it will take more work and more unlocking to really grow that market, which we're very bullish on. But defense, was definitely there at the forefront as well.
And just when you think about how you're going to break down, a cut from maybe from a revenue perspective, do you have an idea in your mind of what that might look like from a balance of commercial and defense?
Our goal would be half and half, 50-50.
Okay. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about, Mike, when you invest in these types of companies, what are some of the things that you're looking for from the foundation of their technology or the founding team? What is it that they're going to be up against, when their strategy is to expand into these more regulated industries?
Yeah, well, I think what we look for is some of the things that you look for in any type of venture investment. How big is the market? In this case, huge, because space is undergoing a revolution. Maybe we come back to that point here. We look for how strong is the founding team. Topher is a great example of that, very capable entrepreneur who also comes with co-founders. So we found that it makes sense if you have a founding team versus someone who's trying to do it solo. There's a lot to get done in a company as you're getting started, as I'm sure Topher can attest to. And we're looking for some differentiation relative to other offerings. Topher's got really the opportunity to bring, state-of-the-art optical sensors combined with infrared or thermal imaging. And I think that's going to be a very, very powerful combination. He's also really pioneering this concept of what can we do in something that is below low Earth orbit, very low Earth orbit. He used the acronym a little while ago, VLEO. So those are some of the things that we would look at that look like it could be a dynamite investment. I'll just say one bit about what's happening in space now for those folks who haven't followed it, with a nod to SpaceX, another commercial company that's been extremely successful here. They have pioneered this concept of a reusable rocket, and it's reduced the cost of getting a payload or whatever you might want to send in space by an order of magnitude. You just can't underestimate how important that is for the growth of the industry that Topher is pursuing. So the ability to get at a lower cost whatever you might want to have in space is really allowing an entire new industry to develop here. And that's sensors, all different types of sensors. In Topher's case, it's optical plus thermal. But there's other types of sensors like synthetic aperture radar, which was used very effectively to see the Russian intent in moving in Ukraine before Putin crossed the border, because those technologies can see through clouds and see at night. So this combination of different types of sensors that we're able to get better resolution of what's happening on Earth really revolutionizes defense, because now my situational awareness is much better than it was before. Enemies can't hide. It's just going to be impossible to do things without seeing what's happening. And then the commercial application, most of what we know about the Earth comes from sensors in space. So to be able to watch, climate change, the water content of the snow in the Sierra, which is so important to know whether California is in drought, on and on and on. So many different applications here. And that's really what makes a great investment, as a company that's able to pursue both the defense market and the commercial market. And into this environment of the revolution in space and space sensors that's happening right now.
I'm curious, Topher, with regards to an expansion into more of the defense space. Did you make an intentional effort in scaling a team that had that type of a background, maybe from a capture or BD perspective, and things that you would recommend for maybe those startup founders out there that are considering their tech to be injected into more of a defense environment, but what steps they might they need to consider, or what they might want to do to give themselves their best shot to navigate those waters. I mean, we're trying to educate a little bit more on that space, because a lot of the listeners here are commercial technologists, and so can be completely unknown territory for folks that haven't. Like, you had the background of Lockheed, so that clearly played a part. But what would you recommend and say, like, some of the things that would be helpful to those that are trying to dip their toe in those waters? Yeah,
great question. I honestly have so many lessons learned from being a first-time founder on a lot of this. I think at the end of the day, if you're bringing a capability or product to the market that is valuable to defense and intelligence, then that's the biggest benefit. And so that fits us as well. And we've gotten a lot of traction there. We haven't really hired that many dedicated people on the business development and sales side. Most of our team is engineering, as we have a lot of core technology that we're building to launch these satellites. We'll launch our first one in about a year and a half. And so a lot of the early BD and sales was done by the founders on the defense side. We brought on a full-time BD person on the US government side at the beginning of this year. He's phenomenal, and he has a lot of help from the team, different engineers that participate, but it's still, he's the one full-time dedicated to that. But it's still enough for us in our phase to get a lot of traction, win some of these contracts, some of these SBIR contracts or DIU opportunities, like where Mike used to lead, and other opportunities from a BAA perspective that we can pursue and win some non-dilutive funding before we launch that will help us from an R&D perspective. I think from an advice perspective, the couple lessons learned in the early days were trying to develop our own SBIR proposals and just all the nuances around that, doing it on ourselves. We lost a few at the beginning and then started working with a consulting group that helped a ton. So I think adding in some external support is definitely worth the cost, especially if they're kind of incentivized by the award of it as well. So that I think that was a lesson learned. And then additionally, getting to the phase 2 part of the SBIR process as quickly as possible opens up a lot of opportunities from a different type of contract vehicle perspective to win some bigger awards. And so that was helpful for us as well. In terms of how quickly we were able to win some of those. But at the end of the day, I think it's really about, does the messaging, the product itself, really resonate with those customers? Do they need it? Is it solving a pain point? And that's where we've gotten, the bulk of our traction from of product, not proper product-led sales, but it's very much product-based.
And we touched on this acronym in a previous episode, but SBIR, what does that stand for?
Okay, yeah, I'm not good at actually questions on what acronyms stand for, because there's so many of them. I think it's Small Business Innovation Research, maybe something. Is that right, Mike?
Like that, right?
That's it.
All right.
It comes from the Small Business Administration, which wanted to fund more smaller companies doing research to help the government. And so there's a tax placed on all of the R&D dollars that are given to each department of the government. Department of Defense has the biggest proportion of that. So it turns out to be about a 3% tax, about $3 billion that the Defense Department will award in SBIR grants each year based on its R&D budget.
Gotcha. Okay. And Mike, you spent a couple of years or maybe more at the Defense Innovation Unit. Can you just give a little bit of paint a little bit picture of what that role was? Because it sounds like it obviously played a big part into how you add value at Shield Capital as well.
Sure. Yeah, 7 years at the Defense Department. And the Defense Innovation Unit, again, set up by Ash Carter, because he saw so many of the innovations that we need are happening in small companies in Silicon Valley and other innovation hubs around the country, as opposed to in government labs. So he saw that flip we talked about a few minutes ago, where the Defense Department used to be inventing all the technology it needed. Now it's a 80-20 on the other side. About 20% of the technology is invented by Defense Department and labs, but most of it is coming from, the vibrant innovation economy that we have in this country, which is a real comparative advantage globally. So, we see that as companies funded by the venture industry. And these are technologies like AI, cyber, space, autonomy. If you think about where are the new things coming from, like generative AI, they're not coming from defense or DARPA, even though those folks are still doing some great work. They're coming from younger, innovative companies out there. So Ash Carter, having realized that, said, well, we need a way to connect with that economy that's happening. So he created this unit. And the unit basically does two things. One, it scopes for what are the hardest problems that the Defense Department has. Some of those will be military unique, so DIU wouldn't be a factor there. But many of them will be leveraging the technologies we just talked about, and we need to find the commercial vendors. So DIU is looking for which are the most important problems to work on, and then what is the commercial vendor set who might be able to solve that problem. So it's a matching of the problem with those commercial vendors, and then it's a process to basically make sure there's competition among those potential suppliers, down select and test in a military environment how well those solutions work, and then select vendors from that, along with the DoD partner or customer who will be funding that effort, and then getting those scaled up. And the DIU uses a special authority, which has a boring name, Other Transaction Authority. It was actually created when NASA was created to, in the wake of Sputnik, to make sure that the government could go fast and not always use something called Federal Acquisition Regulations, which is every bit as cumbersome as it sounds. So by using this special authority of OTA, it really is allowing DIU to operate more like a commercial entity and to go faster and streamline the process. Because one thing we know is that startup companies live and die by cash flow. So the government has to find a way to work faster to be able to support young companies, or they, basically put up their hands and say, no, I can't work with you if you tell me it's going to take 3 or 4 years to get a contract. You could live or die as a young company by waiting for the government, which is why we have a whole set of defense primes that are uniquely configured to support the government. They know the process and they can wait that long for a government contract. So we need to inject an alternative process, which is what DIU is doing, that allows the government to work better with small companies.
On that, I think that's been one of the things that I've seen as being really great, because in the early days, so I worked at plenty of government oriented companies and trying to get that money. Like there were plenty of opportunities where we're like, oh, it wasn't even a government oriented company. We had opportunities where we had a commercial product that could benefit the government, but like the sales, like everything about it was just so hard. It was like, or we can go spend all of our effort getting these smaller dollars faster rather than waiting for these big dollars that might take a long, long time to come. So I think that's been a great innovation on the government side in terms of trying to understand the cycle that you have to do to get these smaller companies in.
And that's great inside knowledge for you to have, Michael, to be able to bring to, as an advisor, really to these startups that you all are investing in, because I think that's part of it, is educating them on, the process and realistic timelines on what might be, what to expect, because I think that's where, like you said, as a startup, you're relying on that cash in those early stages, and you could find yourself in a real pickle if you're putting all your eggs in that basket, not knowing what that timeline might be. So
that's right. Everyone at Shield has experience both in the government. Many have worn the uniform, so from military background, or I'd say, and that's not or commercial experience. So most of my career experience was leading two Silicon Valley companies, Quantum and Symantec. So I'm relatively new to the government side of this, but you need the skill set of both having led companies, which is experience Topher is getting now, to how can you most effectively work with government partners?
Yeah, it's interesting, Topher. I was checking out some of your advisors, some of your strategic advisors on your board, and you've got folks there that, former chief of staff from, intelligence agencies and Department of Defense. How did you align with those folks? Was that a part of the partnership with Shield, or were those connections that you had? I'm always curious on how folks align with their advisory boards.
Shield was a big, I think three of those four were connections from Shield. And yeah, there's definitely, we've already had a ton of value come out of working with that strategic advisory board. We have former director of the National Geospatial Agency, Vice Admiral retired Bob Sharp, who used to run an intelligence agency that's very relevant for imagery. And then I won't go into details on the others. They've all been phenomenal. But that was largely, from, I think, this signal of Shield's investment of how distinguished the Shield team is generally across the board. And then getting those connections, talking about what we're doing, and really having people that are bought into the mission. And so, that was in large part to Shield.
Do you think, well, I guess with your engineering teams, where are most of their backgrounds coming from?
Yeah, I was actually talking with a friend about this yesterday. He was like, I was looking at y'all's jobs, and your engineering positions you have listed just sound crazy, because we have, we need a safe mode GNC algorithmic expert, PhD in this thing or whatever. So a lot of the background, we have a fair mix of experience from traditional aerospace, classified space, so like Lockheed Martin, NASA JPL, et cetera. But then also a fair mix of kind of the new space alumni with SpaceX and some of these other companies. So that's been a great combo for us from a culture and just engineering philosophy perspective. And some of the key aspects of how we've been so successful so far is bringing on these people that have a lot of experience with pretty complex spacecraft from the traditional aerospace domain that, are much more expensive, but have these very exquisite capabilities that we now are in the kind of not free, but like the less constrained space startup world, and we can move much faster. One of our core values is high speed, low drag. And so we have all that experience, and then we have it in this less constrained environment. We can really build some amazing technology that's much more affordable, but still very capable and very, very, very high performance. So it's a fair mix of kind of different space engineering type backgrounds, some more traditional software backgrounds, but largely it's very specialized aerospace jobs.
One of the big things, just being based in the DC area, we've worked with a fair share of, government contracting companies, commercial product, companies, within services, right? There's a lot of work that's done that's in a cleared environment. You can only get exposure to certain pieces of work, especially if it's an intel, right? If you're, top secret and beyond types of clearance. When you're talking about building products that might be, supporting these agencies, would you say it's something that, you're looking for folks that have built products that have, been impacting, secure environments? I mean, I guess trying to think of what level of security it comes into play from a build perspective, right? But not really necessarily saying like they need a security clearance, right? But I'd imagine when you're building, for some of these agencies, right, they want to ensure like, security is kept top front and center. Is that something that plays into your strategy when you're talking about hiring up engineers that are building for, those types of customers?
Not intentionally, more by coincidence. So a lot of our engineers, including myself and one of my co-founders, AJ, we all worked, for years in a building with no windows when we couldn't bring our phone inside, et cetera. Also, it's crazy going from that to now, like I can do half of my work on my phone because it's all Slack and email. It's a paradigm shift. But not intentionally, but by coincidence, we do have a lot of those people, and some of them still have their clearances sponsored through other projects that they work on, which is helpful for us for Albedo because it is beneficial to have familiarity with what's going on in that environment, what kind of use cases and missions we can really provide value for. But in terms of how we're building the product and like needing to put the technology in certain places, that we're not necessarily building classified type technology. Right. But there are ITAR considerations, which is kind of a separate regulatory framework around how we can export information, what kind of technologies we can use in terms of supply chain and things like that. So it still is kind of in that family with those types of technologies, but not necessarily needing to be in a SCIF or anything.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of folks maybe have some hesitancy when they look to expand is, am I need to become a cleared facility here? I think that's a different ball game. If you're doing services, it's a little bit different than building product. But always just bring it up because I think it is something that we get asked quite a bit if we're working on that a product type of role that's injecting that technology into defense.
Mm-hmm.
This is indicative of how much defense is changing because if we went back 10 or 15 years, it would have all been classified, would have all been built by the government. And now you've got the ability to have all of these sensors developed by commercial companies available for anyone to use that information. So the Defense Department needs it. But the flip side is if we don't figure out how to use that, adversaries also can take advantage of that commercial information. So this is where defense needs to be much more welcoming of what's happening in the commercial world to combine what we can learn from those sensors with the exquisite government satellites, which are still being produced. So it's the combination of that that's very powerful.
Right. And that's what's great about the work that, you all are doing at Shield Capital and, some of these other agencies that are really kind of pushing the bill on, being more open. I think that's you kind of touched on those OTAs, but I think, that's kind of like the backstory of where some of this began and continuing to expand on that. We've been seeing it front and center, and I love to see, a lot more investment being applied to those types of industries. It's exciting and necessary. I guess before we transition into the final segment, Mike Gruen, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, there's always questions I like to ask about the sort of the funding and that process. And Mike, one question for you. You mentioned earlier assessing co-founders and you'd like to have actual co-founders and not just a single founder, but are there any concrete things that you really are looking for from a co-founding team? I'm curious.
Well, that's all about just bringing complementary expertise to the CEO. I mean, the CEO is the most important person on that management team. So we got to have faith, as we do in Topher, that he's going to be able to build a successful company. But because no one can do that alone, no matter how talented, we would look for complementary skills. So it could be someone that shoulders part of the engineering or people who are, helping on the sales and marketing side. But you just need complementary expertise around you. There's just too much to do as a single person. And then you get into a fundraising period, which Topher's in now, and that, sucks all the oxygen out of the room for the time that occurs, because the number one job of a CEO is to make sure you have cash in the bank that allows you the runway to keep developing the products. You don't have that, it all comes to a screeching halt.
Right. And actually, that's a great segue, Topher. What's been the most surprising thing for you as a first-time founder going through all this process of getting that capital?
Yeah, good question. And I'll just comment on the co-founder aspect too. I think sure. One thing that's been really, I think in the early days, we identified this pretty quickly, was just the dynamic between myself and my two co-founders was kind of the perfect fit, to Mike's point, of just complementary skill sets and being able to be dynamic when, like in this example, I'm fundraising and I'm just like, okay, sorry guys, can y'all do all this stuff that I normally do when I'm not fundraising? But that dynamic aspect, and then the collaboration aspect, where I think for us it's been helpful to have three, because especially in the early days, we very much more were decide by consensus. Now we just don't have time for that. We have to divide and conquer. But having that, always one other or always a majority or just like those types of dynamics, I think was really helpful for us. So 3 has been good. From a capital perspective, to your question, I don't know if there's been anything that stands out as like a big surprise as a first time founder. I think personally, I wouldn't say I like fundraising, but I probably like it more than most founders. I think most founders just really don't like it. I think it does kind of fit a lot of my natural skill sets of kind of the sales pitching aspect of it, but then also like having the engineering background and the technology we're building. And so I think maybe one surprise that's more of a recent one is just every round it gets harder to delegate and really get into full-time fundraising mode, because that's the ideal, is that's all of your time, kind of to Mike's point earlier. And so it just gets harder and harder because as the company grows, there's just more going on. But yeah, it's been a good journey for us. The timing has been good from a funding perspective. And we're fortunate to have investors that not only just provide capital, but provide a lot of value like Shield.
I mean, I think that's an important last point on the getting investors that add value. I've worked at any number of companies, and there's this notion of like smart money and dumb money. And I've also worked at places where there's indifferent money. The people that the investors are smart. They know the space, but they're kind of indifferent and have so much trust in the founders that they're not that involved. It's just this like interesting dynamic, and I think making sure that you have that relationship right, and that the people that are investing are. Like, as I think you've done a great job with Shield and everything, just really aligning investors with the company itself and the overall goals. So that's awesome.
Yeah, seems like a really great match.
One thing about Shield, we're a small fund. This fund, 175 million under management. You might know some VC firms have billions. I think Andreessen Horowitz might have 30 plus billion. Sequoia. So for us, every investment matters. What can we do to make sure that Topher is successful is on the agenda for us. If you're a huge fund like that, there's no way you could monitor every investment with that same level of care.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. With Shield specifically, compared to some other investors we have with those really big funds, is that we have our people from Shield that are on our board and support us very heavily. But I feel like I get help from a lot of the team at Shield, not just our 2 kind of core people. So like I'm on this podcast with Mike right now, and I feel like I know a lot of the different team that can help in different ways. So I think that's one benefit we have at Albedo of partnering with Shield as a small team and a smaller fund, is that there's a lot of value there across the team, not just with your single partner, like it would be traditionally the case maybe at a different VC fund.
Yeah, I'm getting some good vibes right now on this pairing of bringing a VC and their portfolio founder on. I kind of like it. We've never done it before, so this is the first of its kind. I didn't want it to get too biased, but I think we're in good shape here. This has been a really good back and forth, and I think it is important. It's important to I think that's a good point, Topher, of like Mike saw value in bringing you on and using this as a platform to continue the conversation. So. Yeah. Good on you guys. All right, let's transition to the final segment here. It's called the 5-second scramble. I'll ask you each a series of questions. Try to give me your response within 5 seconds. And some will be business, some will be personal. I'm going to start with you, Topher. Explain Albedo to me as if I were a 5-year-old.
Big camera, go space.
How would you describe your culture?
Also, I have to credit one of our software engineers for that line. That was his culture: transparent, driven, high speed, low drag.
What kind of technologist thrives at Albedo?
Tinkerers, curious people, and experienced engineers.
What can folks be most excited about for Albedo in 2023?
At the end of this year? Or
yeah. For let's just say the next 12 months.
Next 12 months. A lot of technical milestones, a lot of risk burn down, manufacturing, getting into hardware builds, and getting closer to that launch date in early 2025.
Cool. What's the top value add that you look for in an investment partner beyond the check?
So, getting in the trenches with us.
Yeah, good answer. What do you love most about yourself?
Oh, gosh. My liking of Topo Chico.
We'll take that. If you had to pick one fast food joint to establish as the first restaurant on Mars, which one would it be?
Probably Raising Cane's.
Oh, we just got one of those actually out here. Is it like that?
Nice. I haven't had it in a couple of years, but I fond college memories of a lot of late nights at Raising Cane's.
Right. All right. What's the worst fashion trend that you've ever followed?
Oh, that's tough. Probably the way I dressed before my friend started a company called Wythe, and now I just wear all his clothes because I have no taste for fashion, but I know he does. So,
what's the name of the company?
Wythe, New York.
Okay.
This is a shirt. We also have great swag at Albedo. We've got that's a side hustle that might actually turn into the majority of our revenue.
That's where Mike's investment dollars have been going.
Yeah. That's where the big returns are coming from.
That's where the big returns come. What's a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, John Serafini, who supports SHIELD, started this effort for Ukraine, and that's been cool. There's been a lot of Earth observation companies that have gotten behind that, so that's the one that comes to mind.
Cool. We'll throw it in the show notes. What's one skill or hobby that you always wanted to learn but you haven't had the chance to?
Ooh, skateboarding. I like a lot. I try to get into it and then I get injured. I just hurt my wrist a couple weeks ago. So didn't do that as a kid. I really like it, but I feel like I've never quite gotten there to really get into it.
That's good. Cool. And last one, greatest superhero of all time.
Spider-Man.
Nice. All right. That's a wrap. You are good. Pass with flying colors, Topher. Michael, right. You are up. What is your favorite stage of startup to invest in?
Seed, as early as possible.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the culture at SHIELD Capital?
Collaborative, but it's also environment where we speak the truth. So it's direct and collaborative.
What technologies are you most excited about investing in the next 12 months?
Well, I have to include space, right? Even though that's not my specialty. Space, AI, and cyber, my favorites.
Cool. Who is one of your biggest role models?
My goodness, these days, tremendous respect, and we lost him too soon, was Ash Carter. Just a phenomenal leader for innovation and cared so much about people. Phenomenal Secretary of Defense. Yep.
What is a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Second Harvest Food Bank to try and end hunger, even in areas that are pretty affluent, like Northern California.
Lighthearted transition here. Do you have a favorite cereal?
That's a pretty serious question.
I'm sorry. We're gonna switch it up. Favorite cereal.
Talk about superheroes and.
we're on the tail end. It's gonna get real fun here. Watch. Do you have a favorite cereal or breakfast food?
Favorite cereal? I'm eating a lot of Heritage Flakes. It's kind of like cardboard, but it's a little bit of granola mixed in.
That's your future, Tim. That's our future.
When you get to my age, you can't be eating, Frosted Flakes anymore.
Do you have a celebrity doppelganger?
Well, this is an old one, but a lot of people said I look very much like Michael Dukakis. If you remember him, he was a presidential candidate, but from very long time ago, ran against Bush 41.
I think I'm the only one on this call that might remember that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not good looking enough to have other celebrity doppelgangers.
I think I see it. Do you have any phobias or irrational fears?
Snakes, I guess.
Yeah, that's
don't want to get very close with snakes. Yeah.
Same. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, knowing the future. It'd be very useful in my business.
Yeah. And we'll cap it off. Favorite Disney character?
Mickey Mouse, the first one.
Nice. Good stuff. All right. That is a wrap. Thank you both for joining us. You've both been great guests. I think it's an interesting topic. It's very top of mind for a lot of folks. So appreciate y'all coming on and spending time with us on the PAIR program.
Fun to be with you.